Welcome to Adventures in Accessibility, a podcast that explores the far reaches of disability, access, and inclusion, with your host, Emily Schumann.
Welcome back, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Today's guest is award-winning diver and diving coach, Cliff Devries. As a young man, Cliff was a diving prodigy and was on track to make the Olympics. While he was in college, it was discovered that Cliff had a tumor on his spinal cord and he underwent surgery to have it removed. Complications from the surgery left him paralyzed from the neck down. Cliff worked hard to regain as much mobility as possible and then began his journey as a diving coach. Today, Cliff is a distinguished and beloved coach. Among his many achievements, he's won the Upper New York State Athletic Conference Diving Coach of the Year 6 times. In 2018, the College Swimming and Diving Coaches Association of America made him the first diving coach to win the Richard E. Steadman Award. All right. Well, hi, Cliff. Thanks so much for being our guest today. We're so pleased to have you.
Thanks, Emily. It's great to be here.
So some of our listeners might not be familiar with you and your story, so I would love to hear your story from you in your own words.
Well, sure. I was a diver in high school, and I just loved the sport. I dove all the way through high school and then got a scholarship to the University of Kentucky. I went there for a few months, served a mission, and then when I returned, I found out that I had a large tumor in my spinal column, and that was pressing up against the right side of my body. And I went in for surgery, and during the surgery, they basically lost all monitoring function on me. And I'm not sure whether I passed away for a little while or if they just had some problems with their monitoring equipment. But when I came back, when I woke up, I was paralyzed from the neck down. And so a lot of it was the trauma from the surgery, which was basically cutting off the signals from my spinal cord to the rest of my body. When that reduced, I was able to gain a little bit of function on my left side, and then learned how to walk. And then I returned to coaching in the sport that I love, of diving. So that's kind of the very short Cliff Notes version of it.
I think what's so interesting about your story is that, this surgical injury happened to you when you were kind of at your peak athletic physical performance. And so I kind of wonder, what was that like for you, going from being, a top athlete to, now having this paralysis? And did you have sort of an identity crisis? Did it take you some time to come to terms with, acquiring a disability?
Yeah, well, I always say diving saved my life, because I was a high level athlete and working extremely hard to be in the best shape and a really high level athlete. They were able to be very aggressive during the surgery and be able to put me under for a long time. And the surgery was 13 hours long. And my being in good shape had a big impact on me being able to get through the surgery. And then afterwards, this is kind of the part where I took a lot of searching and a lot of time to be able to figure out, okay, what made me be able to come back? And I think it was the lessons that I learned in diving: working hard, never giving up, and performing at your best and doing your best. I realized that I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to let, not being able to walk or not being able to use my right arm stand in the way of life I wanted to have.
Wow, that's powerful. Well, I'm curious to know, you were surprised by the lack of accessibility in the world after you sort of needed that to have that access, and how, what are some of the access challenges that you face today on a daily basis?
Sure. There's hundreds of small obstacles that you have to get over. It's daily, and it is pervasive in everything that we do. So just the small things: curbs, long walks to any entrance at any building, the way that any shopping is set up without adequate distance for wheelchairs, the counters that you have to look over, you can't see over. It's just everywhere. There's nothing that is made simple for somebody who's disabled. Now I'm walking with a cane, and just uneven roadways, uneven sidewalk. There's just so many things. It's, the list is infinite.
Well, a lot of what you're talking about is, are things that are governed by the Americans with Disabilities Act in terms of the standards for accessible design. And so that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, when did you learn about the ADA, and kind of what did you learn And, how do you feel? Does the ADA impact your life? Have you had to leverage the ADA in any way?
When I was in the hospital, there were two people who really helped me, and I don't even know their names. I don't know who they were, but they came in and they were in wheelchairs. And as everybody knows, directly after your injury, it's an extremely difficult time. And they kind of let me see that, you can be mobile, you can have a normal life and do a lot of great things, even if you are disabled. So, and they kind of showed me, all right, there's all these things set up for you to help you. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but there are a lot of things there. And that's when I learned about the ADA and finding out about what things were available to people with limited mobility. And so that was really, really helpful for me. And then going out and seeing that there's cutouts now. There's cutouts on walkways, and there's automatic doors, automatic door pulls, handicapped doors. And there's so many things that it would really be close to impossible if it wasn't there. And so and one thing that I recognized when I was in England and going around, that it is much more difficult to get around in England. They are making progress. There are a lot of things that are going on, but the mobility in the US is much better because of the ADA.
Yeah. That's interesting. I didn't know that about the difference between England and America. Do you think that you having a disability changed the perspectives of the people around you, that people that you knew before? Do you think that made them more sensitive to the needs of people with mobility disabilities?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of people who don't know how to interact with me just because they think that my disability has changed my entire personality. And, it has in some ways. But I think a lot of people have difficulty broaching the subject and going through and talking about, oh, you know what, this must be difficult for you, so it's definitely changed. And friendships that I had aren't there anymore. But I've grown new friendships that I know I wouldn't have gotten if I wasn't disabled. So yeah, it's a different world.
That's interesting, this concept of, or this idea of how people treated you after your injury versus before. And I wonder if we could stick with that for a second, and what would be your preference, or what would be your advice to the people who are non-disabled when they are in that situation? Do you think it's better to address it, to ask those questions? Obviously it's going to vary from one individual to the next, but I wonder what your thoughts on that are.
Sure. Let me tell you a little story. So in diving, a lot of the divers don't like to have cameras right there behind the board, and or photographers who are taking pictures, right? And I always say, you know what? You do not want to push those people away. Those are the people who are trying to make you into something that everyone can see. And so, and I feel kind of the same way about talking about disability. If people who are disabled are saying, you know what, I really don't want to talk about it, it's personal, or it's very sensitive, then we're pushing away those people who are trying to find out about us and trying to find out the best way to discuss your abilities and disabilities. And so I'm very open about it. I think that, these topics have to be discussed, and the more they're out in the open, and the more that people who are disabled, like, us, talk up and speak up, then, the more awareness everyone is going to have. And people are going to be more comfortable about it, talking about it all the way around.
How has having a disability impacted your outlook on life? I mean, I know you mentioned this already a little bit, and also your thoughts on the human body. And you mentioned that too, how your physical fitness you felt like was critical going into your surgery for your survival. But I wonder if you could just expound on that, how disability has changed the way you look at life and the human body.
Sure. Well, there are a couple different things. I think that there is definitely an attitudinal and spiritual aspect that you have to have, just the motivation to be able to go forward and work and do whatever you can with whatever you have. If you have one arm like me, then work on that one arm. If you have one leg, work on that one leg, do abdominal exercises, get out, do whatever you can, just whatever is available to you, even if it's small. And that's going to help you. It's going to help your physical ability. It's going to help your mental performance. That's the main thing that has changed, is that I've got to figure out different ways. I no longer do any high level activities. I'm not doing serious abdominal exercises where you're hanging from a bar and lifting your legs over your head. I'm just doing basic things. I'm trying to get on a treadmill and walk at a quarter mile an hour. I'm trying to get on an elliptical. I'm trying to do as much of a sit up as I can, even though it goes sideways. So everything is a little bit different, but doing anything that I can for the time. And injuries pop up. If my arm gets hurt, it kind of shuts down half of my exercises. And if I fall down or something, then I've got to take a break for a while. But physical activity, it's different because you're not able to do the same exercises, but it's still extremely important.
I learned that you recently just started diving again. Is that right? And I wonder if you can share that story and maybe what that meant to you or what that felt like being able to do a dive again.
Yeah. So they did that big special on ESPN, and it's gotten a lot of publicity, and it's really neat. But I've been actually doing that dive for about 15, 16 years now. I've been doing that. And so it's quite a while, but it takes a lot of setup. I've got to have, 3 or 4 people in the water to help me out. I've got to have a person up on the board to make sure I get out to the end. And so I'm only able to do it once a year, but I love it. It's great. Being able to fall in the water at a good speed is that's a lot of fun, brings back a lot of memories, and it's pretty emotional for me, just being able to get in the water and dive in. So I love it. I think it's fantastic. I didn't know how inspirational it would be until I see all these comments coming in about how people are inspired and they love it, and they're really feeling good about me being able to do something that I love. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I think it's great too. What do you think that, having a disability and, learning to work with the body that you have how is that translating into your coaching? What lessons do you impart to your athletes based on what you've learned there?
Yeah. So with my disability, I've really had to take things very, very slowly and break things down into very, very small parts. Just being able to start off moving my toe and my ankle until I was able to bend my knee, and I had a lot of tone and stiffness in my leg. So just being able to go through that, and then being able to go from there to standing up, just the very, very small little improvements are really important. And taking that over into my coaching and in diving, really broken down the diving and the instruction into very, very small components so that the divers are able to understand from a very, very basic level exactly how those dives should work. And it's been very helpful for the divers. And it's kind of the reason why we've done so well at Upstate Diving with 3 AAU national champions or national championships and over 25 AAU national champions, USA Diving national finalists at the Olympic trials. We've had a lot of success. And I think a lot of it is to do with me breaking down that basic parts and from my injury, learning how to do that.
And as a coach, I can imagine that part of your role is to inspire and motivate your athletes when they're feeling defeated. What coachly advice would you have for any listeners out there that are feeling defeated right now, either because of a personal struggle or current events or something else?
Whenever you have these periods that are down, 2 things. When you recover, you're going to be so much stronger. Thinking beyond where you are right now is really, really important. And it's not going to last forever. You're not going to be down in the dumps forever. Everybody, has difficulties, and you'll make it through it. It might be hard, and you can take time in doing that and working your way through it, but you will recover. And then secondly is that when you're going through these things, you've got to have a goal. You got to have a focus on what you're going to be able to do in the future. Having a goal, mine was to coach and to coach at a high level. And so find your goal, find your fire. What is that goal? What is that fire that you have in you? I wasn't going to be able to dive anymore. And so that goal was gone. So I had to find a different one, and coaching was what it was. And so, it might not be your first goal. If you were a serious athlete before, you're going to have to switch and transition. But the lessons that you've learned before your injury or before your disability, or even just while you've been disabled, if you were born disabled, then you know what, you've got something in you that you can bring out. And again, and I'll say it over and over again, if you can find something to bring out in others, if you can find what is great in others, then that can motivate you. Those would be the 2 things. Keep on working. It's not going to last forever. And then find your goal and see what you can do to help others.
Yep, that's really powerful. Well, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about accessibility or the world, what would be your hope for the future of accessibility?
There's 2 things. There's a bunch of different physical aspects to getting in and out of places and be mobile, but there's also that aspect of the popular conscience of what disability is. And if I could wave a magic wand, I would say that we could all be more active on communicating about disability and about how we can help each other. I really feel that there's a huge amount of brain power and energy in the disability community. And I think that if we focus on what we can do together, I think we can make huge impacts and strides forwards in the popular conscience and the mindset of everybody saying, you know what, these people, they might not be able to walk well, they might not be able to use their arms well, but they are real contributors to society. And once that changes, once that mindset changes, I think you'll see huge strides in both the able community and the disabled community working together.
Well said. I mean, that's perfect. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners about yourself, about diving, just anything else you'd like to share?
I'm just so thankful for your organization, for the ADA, and for the people who push it forward, because, right after my injury, there was a group of people who reached out to me and who made me feel welcome in my new body. And you know what? They did everything they could. They had a sit ski event where they took us out skiing. They really made sure that I knew that there was a place for me, no matter how things ended up with me physically. And so there's a great support community out there. And I'm just really thankful to people who have helped me along my way, and to the ADA for actually making so many great things happen for the disabled community.
Well, Cliff, I have really enjoyed talking to you today. Where can our listeners go to get in touch with you, learn more about you? What would you say?
Most everything I do runs through the Upstate New York Diving. So if they want to find out about Upstate Diving and my club that I do there, find out about me there. And that's going to be the main thing until my book comes out. I'll be able to find out about that then.
Oh, well, you buried the lead. Tell us more about the forthcoming book.
It's just going to be a little bit about me and my story about when the video came out and I saw so many people commenting on it. I never thought of myself as being inspirational or being the person that people looked up to. And so I went back and I thought, why are all these things happening? What did I do in my recovery to make it so important and such a story for so many people? And so I'm just going to go through and review kind of how I deconstructed what I did in my recovery to get back up on the boards and to do that dive on my birthday every year. So that's what it'll be.
Very cool. Well, we will look forward to that, and we'll make sure to share, the website and your social media channels in our show notes and all of that stuff, so listeners can connect with you.
Really appreciate the interview.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Adventures in Accessibility. Tune in next time for another dive into the unknown.
Adventures in Accessibility is hosted by Emily Schumann, and Jessica Lucinia is our sound engineer. This podcast is a project of the Rocky Mountain ADA Center and is funded under a grant from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. Grant number 90DPAD0009-01-00. This production is intended solely for entertainment and informal guidance and should not be considered legal advice. The opinions expressed by guests are not necessarily held or endorsed by the Rocky Mountain ADA Center.